Tonight, the young man murdered in a shocking case of mistaken identity.
He was very happy, someone you could have a laugh with. He was just lovely.
He was killed using a rare 87-year-old army revolver. Will someone watching tonight be able to name who pulled the trigger? Hello and welcome to Crimewatch. We're going to have more on the murder of Ricardo Cunha in just a moment. But first, a look at some of the other cases that we need your help with tonight. The detectives behind me here want to know who deliberately set fire to a bungalow, killing 81-year-old grandmother Leah Brooke.
A very kind, gentle lady. It's just a waste of a life. So sad.
And can you name the masked man who raided a supermarket, holding the manager hostage for nearly an hour whilst he waited for the safe's automatic timer to open? As well as tying him up, he repeatedly threatened his captive with a knife. If you've any idea who put that man through such an ordeal, do get in touch. And over here is the marriage certificate of convicted serial killer Peter Tobin. Detectives urgently need to trace the official witnesses to that 1969 ceremony. Were you there? And Rav is here with this month's collection of wanted faces.
Yeah, certainly am. Tonight we've got people wanted for murder, rape and robbery. So if you recognise any of them, please do let us know.
And Matthew, what have you got for us?
We have the incredible story of the barmaid who, after seeing a Crimewatch appeal to trace a suspected paedophile, lured him to the bar where she worked before wrestling him to the ground.
I remembered that he brought the taxi cards into the bar, so I phoned and asked for him.
Are you ready?
You know exactly why I'm doing this. Somebody call the police.
A fascinating behind-the-scenes look at what happens once those calls start coming in to detectives here in the studio.
Now, as you probably know, there's been enormous press coverage surrounding the death just before Christmas of Bristol landscape architect Joanna Yates. Well, last week, Crimewatch filmed a reconstruction of Joanna's last known movements. And I interviewed her parents, her brother, and her boyfriend. He was the man who originally reported her missing. As a result of this and further appeals from her family, the police received over 300 new calls. Well, last Thursday, a 32-year-old Dutch national, Vincent Tabak, was arrested, and on Monday he appeared in court charged with Joanna's murder. Well, with legal proceedings now active, we can't show you the reconstruction or the interviews with Joe's family, but we will, of course, keep you up to date with all the developments in this case. Now, September the 11th, 2001 is a date that none of us will forget in a hurry, but for one family in South London, September the 11th, 2010 has now become just as poignant. It was the day that 23-year-old Ricardo Cunha was shot dead in his home.
Everything is missing. Everything in my life is missing at the moment because he was my future.
He was very, very kind to everyone. He was always there for everyone. He was very happy, someone you could have a laugh with. He was just lovely.
Me and Ricardo met about 3 years ago. He was just something else. He was just a different person to get to know. He was special inside and out. The first day I saw him, I fell in love with him straight away.
So you're going to watch football upstairs or down here?
I forgot about the football. Upstairs.
Yeah.
Last one upstairs turns all the lights off.
Oh,
Yeah?
wait, Rick, wait!
He really liked having a laugh, he was always up for it. He was just like a normal 23-year-old guy that would want to joke and laugh and just be around his friends and family.
Oh, there's a surprise birthday party for Anna on Saturday.
That's it.
You gonna come?
Yeah, you want to go?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, it's probably nothing, don't worry about it. It starts at 10, so maybe we can get there for like 10:30 and then we can leave at like 12 or something.
You heard that, right?
Yeah.
That's not right. I'm going to go and check that out. 1 second.
Ricardo? Rick? Ricardo! Oh my God.
Emergency ambulance, tell me exactly what's happened.
Can I have my boyfriend just come in the bedroom and he's bleeding? Oh my
Is he awake?
God.
Is he conscious?
No, he's not. I don't know what to do. He's not breathing.
He's not breathing. So what you
There's
need to
blood
do...
everywhere. Oh my God, I'm so scared.
Ricardo died from a single gunshot wound to the head. But the bullet that killed him came from no ordinary gun. It came from one of these, a Webley .455 caliber revolver dating back to 1924. So he came up here, the gunman, and this was where he shot Ricardo from here, from exactly this point.
That's right. When Ricardo looked out of that window, the gunman fired a single shot that, having killed Ricardo, then continued up through the ceiling, out through the roof tiles, and its trajectory then took it back over the gunman's head that ended up in the grassed area down below us.
Four days after the shooting, a member of the public found this Webley revolver here on the Clapham Manor estate in South London. The gun had been thrown into the bushes, and what's worse, it still contained a live round. We're just a few miles from where Ricardo lived, and the police are now confident that this is the actual weapon used to kill him.
It's been really tough. It's been hard. We just miss him even more. It's him coming through the door. It's him asking me how I am.
Whoever they intended to get out that night, they totally got the wrong person. It's so hard when you build your future with somebody that hasn't even started yet, but you have so many plans and so many things you both want to do. That he was everything to me.
Tragedy. Well, I'm joined now by DCI Nick Scola, who, as we saw, is leading the investigation for the Metropolitan Police. A terrible tragedy. How are the family coping so far?
Completely devastated. Ricardo was incredibly close to his family, especially since the death of his father in 2007. His girlfriend Sapna and his sister Lily have been very strong in speaking out tonight.
We certainly have. A fine, decent 23-year-old man. Do you think... I mean, the initial reporting was that this was what is known as a targeted attack. What can you tell us about that?
The way the shooting was carried out does suggest it was a targeted attack, but we can find nothing to... Well, there's nothing in Ricardo's life to explain why he was killed. He was an ordinary, decent, hard-working man who, like thousands of others, enjoyed playing Sunday morning football and the occasional midweek game of five-a-side. He'd never been in trouble with the police, and he had no criminal connections or associates. Obviously, we've got to consider that he was mistaken for someone else, that the attackers went to the wrong house, or there was a robbery that went completely wrong. We do need to hear from anybody who knows why Ricardo or his home was targeted that night.
Now, we saw there in our film, Matthew showed us this. Let's take a look at this. This could be, well, this is a really important piece of evidence, because it's a very unusual piece of evidence. Just tell us a bit more about it.
This gun, a 1924 Webley revolver, was found by a member of the public nearby. What interests me about that gun is how well preserved it is. Our firearms expert called it out-of-the-box condition and suggested it may have been in storage for a period of time. It gives the impression of being a keepsake that may have been in the family since the war.
Finding ammunition for a gun like this must be tough, no?
That's right. Finding ammunition for an old gun is very difficult, and it's making criminal use of that kind of firearm increasingly rare, which is why I'm investigating that perhaps that gun was stolen in an unreported burglary around the time of Ricardo's murder.
And you think it was maybe used as well at some point around about the shooting?
That's right. What I do know about that gun is the day before it was found by police, it was involved in another shooting.
Right.
That shooting, luckily no one was hurt in that shooting, and that shooting took place outside Picton House on the Clapham Park estate. OK.
Now, Nick, very quickly, we want to take a look at some CCTV that you bought in. It's not great quality, but why is it important? This
CCTV is taken in Tivoli Road, and it shows two youths walking towards the scene of the shooting less than 2 minutes before it happens. I'm satisfied that they would have heard the shot and would probably have seen people hanging around or maybe leaving the area. OK, so you want to trace those witnesses. That is really important. Thank you for now, Nick. I would please urge you at home, think of Ricardo's family, do the right thing tonight. It's clear, you saw it, just how much they are all suffering. I should tell you there is a £20,000 reward for information leading to a conviction, so if you can help, now's the time to call. Here's the number, 0500 600 600. Now here's Rav with his first batch of wanted faces.
First up tonight is Crimewatch Singh-Butt. Here he is, and he's wanted after a man was stabbed to death last month. 24-year-old Butt disappeared after the incident in Slough on December the 28th. He has connections in the Luton area, but could well be anywhere in the UK. Now, Butt, who may wear a dark head covering, has grown a full beard since this picture was taken. Now, this image of Butt, captured by CCTV cameras at Slough railway station just hours after the stabbing, shows how he may look now. Next, over here is Anthony Raymond Conroy. Police would like to speak to 23-year-old Conroy in relation with a bank robbery in Herefordshire last September, during which a security guard was hit over the head with a stone slab. The robbers made off with more than £50,000 in cash. Conroy's from Liverpool and has a 2-inch scar on his right cheek and a 3-inch circular burn on his right arm. Number 3 on the board tonight is Sam Bailey. Officers from South Wales Police want to speak to 30-year-old Bailey after £40,000 worth of drugs and stolen car parts were discovered at his home address in Trehavard near Pontypridd. Bailey has a missing front tooth and has a tattoo of a dog on his right forearm. He's believed to have links to the travelling community. And lastly for now, number 4 is Roland Squirage. The 29-year-old is wanted for a recall to prison after breaching the terms of his licence. Albanian Squirage is serving a 7-year sentence for aggravated burglary, and he has links across London. Now, he's considered dangerous and should not be approached, so if you do see him or know where he is, just call police immediately. Now, all of our wanted faces are on the Crimewatch website, which is bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch, and if you know where any of them are now, please just pick up the phone and let us know. The number's 0500 600 600, or you can text us on 63399, which is crime, space, and then your message. Really important to leave that space or your message just won't get through.
Now, Leah Brooke was a pretty remarkable woman. Originally from Belgium, she met her British husband at the end of the Second World War. She went on to live a full life in this country, where she was a very active part of her local community in Sandal, near Wakefield, in West Yorkshire. Why then would someone deliberately set fire to her house and kill her?
Fire brigade. Hi, it looks like my neighbour's roof's on fire. There's an old lady lives in it, but it's really, really burning.
These are the quiet country lanes on the outskirts of Sandal near Wakefield in West Yorkshire. This is a peaceful area where the people are friendly and know each other well. But just over 2 years ago, someone committed a most shocking crime, a crime that devastated a local family.
Although Mum was 81, she didn't think of herself as a little old lady. And she was very independent. She still went everywhere on her own. She still drove everywhere. It was taken for granted. Very kind, gentle lady. Just a warm, loving mum. My mum was Belgian, a very beautiful young lady. The Second World War caused her to meet my father, who was travelling through her village, and they had to stay somewhere. And the romance developed. They got married in Belgium. We were a family of 5 children, 2 girls and 3 boys. She now has 12 grandchildren, and she felt very proud of them all. On the Sunday, she always went to the 9 o'clock mass. It was taken for granted. She always sat in the same place because she and my dad always sat there. The sun always shone through the windows in the roof. She knew everyone, and going to church was just part of her upbringing and part of her life. On that Sunday, after she'd been to church, because she was having the coffee morning on the Monday, the ladies were all coming round, so she needed to make sure that it was all organised.
That afternoon, Mrs. Brooke arrived back at what should have been the safety of her own home. But what she could not have known was that someone was planning a callous attack that night, an attack that would have terrible consequences.
Yes. Do you want me to pick you up? No, no problem at all. Oh, I'm really looking forward to it. Bye for now. Bye.
The fire was so intense that it took firefighters over 3 hours to bring it under control. Sadly, it took far less time for Leah Brooke, trapped in her burning home, to be overcome with smoke and lose her life.
That was most horrible. A few hours. And then the policeman coming to say that they'd actually recovered Mum's body and taken it away. All the horrible things that I never expected to have to do.
This is the place where Mrs. Brooke's house used to stand. We believe the person who did this knew this area well and specifically targeted the property. We need to know who committed this horrendous crime. If you know the truth or you have any information, now's the time to come forward.
It's just such a futile act. She would still be alive today and still moving around, and it's just a waste of a life. It's so sad.
Yeah, Yes, a futile act. Well, joining me now is Detective Superintendent David Previn. You said it yourself, this is a peaceful area where people are friendly. Why on earth would somebody want to do this to an 81-year-old woman?
Well, what we believe is that it was the property that was attacked and not Mrs. Brooks specifically. You can see on the map here that this is quite a remote area.
Right.
She lived here at Sandal Grange Farm, which is just off Walton Lane on the outskirts of Wakefield. Whoever did this either knew this area very well or they'd taken the time to check it out before the attack.
Right. We saw there in the reconstruction, we saw a bit of fire service video. Let's take a look at that again. In it we can see, if people just look to the right-hand side, there it is. That van, the white van, the big one, belonged to Mrs. Brooks' son, Howard. He ran a construction business actually from her property. That was the base. Is it your belief that there's some connection here? Could it have been revenge on him, revenge on his business?
Yes, I think that could be right. And I think Howard is key here for me. Howard ran a construction business which was called Howard Brook Building Contractor from the address. And what he did, he parked his van there each night.
Right.
And what we believe is that someone wanted to cause harm to Howard.
I see.
And it was that happened there. Someone probably wanting to get in, probably because of his business dealings.
Okay, what about the fire itself? Does that leave any clues, any important aspects?
It does. What we do know is that it was started using white spirit.
Right.
And that the fire would have been intense and rapid, and that may have caused some flash burns to the offender. What that could have meant would be burns to the hands or the arms or perhaps the extremities of the face. So does anyone remember someone coming home that night or in the early hours who perhaps was smelling of white spirit or had some burns to their skin or to their clothing? What I do think is that whoever did this will have told someone.
Okay.
And I'd say this, if that was you, please do the right thing and call in.
That's for sure. £10,000 reward also linked to this case, we should tell people. The murder took place 2 years ago, but this lady's family still need to know who did this and why they did it. If you know anything that might help, there's the number again, 0500 600 600. David, thank you to you. Now here's Rav with some criminals caught on camera.
And we start tonight's CCTV in Forest Gate in East London, in the moments just after a fatal shooting. This is the aftermath of a shooting outside the Sugar Lounge nightclub in May last year. It's just gone 6 a.m. when clubbers rushed to help one of the victims lying by the Range Rover. But focus your attention on this man in the white shirt on his mobile phone with the bottle of champagne in his hand. As others tend to the man on the ground, he has something else on his mind as he leans into the car and retrieves a gun. And watch as he walks away, casually slipping it into the belt of his jeans. 2 men died in this incident, and police need to find that gun and the man who took it. Name, please. Now, here's something a bit different. This is exclusive footage from the Serious Organised Crime Agency, or SOCA, exposing a 100 grand drug deal taking place in Hull in December 2008. Their undercover surveillance footage shows a white van pull up before 2 men transfer boxes containing 40 kilos of cannabis into the boot of a Ford Focus, all happening in the car park of a DIY store in the middle of the day. Well, now SOCA needs your help identifying this man, the passenger who arrived in the white van. They know the name of this guy in the check shirt seen handing over the drugs. He's 44-year-old Ian Henry Sumner. He's been charged with offences for supplying cannabis, but failed to turn up at court in May last year. Officers think he may now be in Spain. And as for the other 2, Tracy Jane Eckstein, the white van driver, she's already been sentenced to 18 months in prison. While Jeff Wilson, the driver of the Ford Focus, pleaded guilty to possession with intent to supply cannabis and was given a 32-month prison sentence. So it's just these 2 we still need to find. Tell us where they are tonight. Now, you might have seen these 2 faces in the news recently, and here's why. It's 10:15 at night on the Tuesday before Christmas, as 2 masked men make their way into the Gonka mini market in Finsbury Park in North London. They threaten the owner of the shop and his son with a gun and a knife, demanding cash from the till. Thinking the attackers are about to shoot the shopkeeper, his son grabs the gunman. The shopkeeper then tackles the man holding the knife, in return receiving several stab wounds to his head. During the scuffle, both the gunman and the man with the knife are unmasked. Police think this is the second armed robbery they'd committed that night. Stop them doing this, or worse, again, and name them tonight. Right, now you've had a look, please give us a call, 0500 600 600, or you can text us on 63399, type crime, space, and then your message. And if you need a second look, go online, bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch.
Now, Matthew and Rav have got news on some cases we featured previously.
Well, back in October, we asked for your help with the murder of PC Keith Blakelock, who was killed during riots at the Broadwater Farm estate in North London. 25 years after his death, his family made an emotional appeal to find his killers.
I know that it was the uniform that they were attacking that night, but there was a father and a husband inside that uniform. And they killed him. Not one, two, but quite a lot of people attacked Keith that night. He didn't stand a chance.
Well, as a result of that appeal, police received several very significant calls from people who unfortunately didn't leave their details, including one caller who asked to speak directly with the senior investigating officer. Well, tonight they're appealing for those callers to get back in touch. They want to stress that all information will be treated confidentially and there are systems in place to protect people's identities. Anyone with information should contact the police incident room on 0208 733 4613. There's also a special number for anyone who specifically wanted to speak with that lead detective on this case, John Sweeney. That number is 07906 38 0041, and those numbers can also be found on our website, bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch.
Now, this is footage of a man being punched in a nightclub in Warrington from Christmas Day 2009, which we showed you last June. Well, as a result of your calls, the offender was identified as 20-year-old Anthony Winskill. Last month, Winskill, who's from Warrington, pleaded guilty to actual bodily harm and was given a 6-month suspended sentence, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay his victim £800 in compensation. Nice one.
Now, of course, being the victim of crime can be terrifying for anyone, but imagine being held captive by a knife-wielding attacker for almost an hour. That's what happened in our next case, and amazingly, the whole ordeal was caught on CCTV. Well, DC Robin Aspin is working on the case. He's with me now. This whole thing sounds horrendous.
Yes, well, basically at 5 a.m. on the 24th of September last year, the manager of the Co-op store in Hove in Sussex arrived to open up. As he unlocked the doors, he was surprised by a masked man armed with a knife. He was forced to the shop's office where he was tied to a chair. He was then told to open the shop's 2 safes. He was unable to do this, though, as they were on a time lock and they weren't due to open for another 45 minutes.
Right, and so the attacker decided that he was going to sit it out, really?
Yes, that's right. As you can see from the CCTV footage we have from the shop's office, the attacker decides, once he's tied him up, to actually sit down opposite the victim. He then produces a second larger knife from the bag that he's brought with him, and he uses it to shred pieces of paper in front of him, all the time threatening to use the knife on him.
And this went on and on until eventually, as you see, the safe did open?
Yes, the safe eventually opened and the attacker filled his bag with over £20,000 in cash and made off, leaving the manager tied to the chair.
Right, you say he filled his bag. There we can see the bag, and we also saw the knife that was sitting on the worktop. Distinctive?
Very distinctive. First of all, the bag itself is one like this. It's Morrison's reusable limited edition bag with a picture of a carrots on the front.
Right.
And secondly, the knife, the second larger knife, is one similar to this. And this is very distinctive in that it has a shadow bull motif on the blade itself. Now, this knife is only used in certain supermarkets. It's not available to the general public.
Oh, OK, so that's quite limited. Then, what else do you know about the attacker himself?
Well, we believe the attacker, because of his working knowledge of the shop, may have been employed by them before. He's described as having a northern accent, being overweight. He was wearing grey frayed jeans and unusual characteristic is that he was wearing glasses with no lenses in them.
OK, so he doesn't wear glasses, he was wearing a disguise with him.
Exactly, yes. Okay. And the co-op are offering a £5,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the attacker. OK,
Robin, for now, thanks very much. So, can you name this armed robber who, as you saw, he terrified this victim for nearly an hour? Or do you recognise that distinctive bag or the knife? If you do, get in touch tonight. Call us on the usual number. It's 0500 600 600. And if you've been a victim of crime, there is the victim support line there on 0845 30 30 900. Right, I want you to come over here and take a little look at this. Do you know this man? Or maybe this man? Or maybe this man? He seems to be suffering from something of an identity crisis. A special police operation has uncovered a haul of fake IDs, including over 40 items bearing the likeness of this one man. Who is he? And this is serial killer Peter Tobin's marriage certificate. Detectives urgently need to speak to the witnesses to his 1969 wedding ceremony. Matthew?
We have the inside story on how this man made the journey from our wanted faceboard to a prison cell, all thanks to a no-nonsense barmaid.
I was just so glad that I was watching Crimewatch and I could actually do something about it. I think sometimes I didn't really think what I was actually doing. It just happened, and it happened the way it did.
I know who you are.
But before all of that, here's Rav with some wanted faces we still need your help with.
And next over here is Samson Olimide Makinde, and he's wanted by police on suspicion of raping a 21-year-old woman in Oxford city centre in December 2009. 32-year-old Makinde, who has a strong Nigerian accent, skipped bail in February last year and hasn't been seen since. He's known to have links in Oxford and London. 6 is John Edwin Oliver. The 44-year-old is wanted after doing a runner from Salisbury Crown Court, where he was on trial for actual bodily harm and possessing an imitation firearm. He was convicted in his absence after threatening his girlfriend's ex-partner with a gun. The victim was so scared he jumped out of a window and broke his ankle. Oliver, who is a busker, is also known by the name Guitar Dave and has links to Salisbury, London and Bristol. Number 7 is Ile Ibrahim, and police want to speak to the teenager in relation to a street robbery which happened last April in Harrow, Middlesex, during which the victim had jewellery snatched from around her neck. It's thought that Ibrahim may be in the South London area. And our final face on the board tonight, anyway, is Paul Christopher Finnegan. Police would like to speak to the 22-year-old in connection with drug trafficking after an operation which was based in Liverpool between March 2008 and May 2009. The gang brought more than £600,000 worth of cocaine, heroin and cannabis into the country. Finnegan, who's only 5'5" tall, has a very youthful appearance. He's known to have connections in Merseyside as well as Amsterdam. So, have you seen anyone there that you recognise? If so, please call us 0500 600 600, or you can text us 63399. Just type crime, space, and then your message. And remember, all of our wanted faces will stay on the website, which is bbc.co.uk/crimewatch, until they're caught.
Now, it's been several months since we last spoke to detectives from Operation Anagram, the nationwide investigation into the serial killer Peter Tobin's life. He's already serving 3 life sentences for murder, but police believe he may have committed many more. In July, we featured an exclusive interview with one of Tobin's first-known victims. At the time, she asked to remain anonymous.
He was lying on top of me, and he's pulling at my clothes, and he's punching into my face, and he's pulling my hair and pulling it out in chunks. And I'm actually screaming for my life.
Well, thankfully, Tobin was scared off on that occasion, and the woman escaped with her life. That interview, however, prompted over 700 people to call in with information about Tobin, including some new potential victims. Tonight, we are joined again by Detective Superintendent David Swindle, the man leading the Operation Anagram. He's going to ask for your help to find 3 more people who could help him and his team complete the missing pieces of Tobin's life and help determine how many more victims suffered at his hands. Thanks for joining us again, David. So update us then on what's happened since you were last here, since you got those 700 calls.
Yes, since that last appeal, we've identified seven women that have been raped by Peter Tobin, and we've followed up thousands of lines of inquiry, including the commencement of the excavations in Brighton and Hampshire, which was exactly a week after the programme. Unfortunately, we never found anything at these, but the search for the truth regarding what Tobin has done continues.
That's for sure, and you're all working hard on it. Who is it? I said 3 people. Who are the 3 people you're appealing for tonight?
Yes, exactly. We're appealing for 3 people. We've had a 100% success rate in appealing in the past, and hopefully this comes off tonight as well. We're appealing for 2 people that are witnesses to his first marriage. That's his first marriage to Margaret in 1969 in Brighton. And a 3rd person is a male called Paul, who we know Tobin was very, very friendly with. Is possibly called Paul Maguire. He lived at the same place that Tobin worked at, the Seafront Hotel in Brighton. They were very friendly. He was linked into the biker scene, and he also spoke, this guy Paul spoke about the French Foreign Legion. He's a close friend of Tobin's.
OK, so Paul is a really important part of the jigsaw. If I can just ask you to look back for a moment to the marriage certificate.
Yes.
Remind us of the names on the marriage certificate, these witnesses that you're desperate to trace.
The names are Hardy. It's a Mr. and Mrs. Hardy. It was a married couple. It's a Peter Hardy, and her initial may have been P. They lived in St Michael Place in Brighton at that time. We don't know too much about them, but certainly they'll remember this.
Of course they will. Witness to a marriage, 1969. Yes. And Paul, possibly Maguire, is the other person that you want to find out about. Thanks for now, David. So, were you there? Were you at that marriage, 1969, Peter Tobin? Or do you know these people? If so, do get in touch. 0500 600 600. There's lots more information about Tobin on our website, bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. For now, Rav has his 2nd batch of CCTV.
And we start this time in Alverley in Shropshire, where last August 2 blokes seemed to be having a spot of bother.
Oi, oi, what are this pair up to? They seem to be locked out of the house, and so they should be. It's not theirs. They're wearing some colourful matching T-shirts, but they're not exactly enjoying a purple patch as they fail to notice the security cameras the homeowners had installed following a previous burglary. The pair cased the joint before trying to jimmy open the window, but in doing so, they set off the burglar alarm and decide to scarper. Help police catch this pair of purple perils tonight. It's early morning in a shopping centre in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire. This man seems to be feeling the cold, staying wrapped up warm even when indoors. It's just after 9 AM on a Friday morning last October, when he walks into the Ernest Jones Jewellers where 2 female shop assistants have just finished putting out the displays. Now the reason for his covering up becomes clear. He grabs one woman and roughly drags her around the counter, threatening both her and her colleague with a large knife. With the women left cowering on the floor, he empties the cabinets and makes his escape, stealing a total of £30,000 worth of jewellery. These women were left terrified by what happened. We need to find their attacker tonight. Name, please. This is footage from a hidden camera filming from inside the front doorway of a pensioner's home in Blandford in Dorset. The CCTV was put up after she was targeted by distraction burglars. It's a Saturday lunchtime last April, and the elderly homeowner answers the door to a woman who says she's lost her dog. She asks whether she can come through and check the backyard for her pet. While the homeowner is away helping her, a man slips into the house, before leaving a few minutes later. The woman, who didn't find her dog, follows shortly afterwards. After they'd gone, the pensioner noticed an envelope containing cash and money from her purse had been taken. The police want to speak to these 2 urgently. Tell us who they are tonight. Inside a bookmaker's shop in Porthcawl in South Wales last July. But this guy isn't here to place a bet. He leaps over the counter and threatens the staff with a large knife. He made off with £700, but I bet he didn't bargain on this camera capturing a great shot of his face. Become the bookie's favourite and name him tonight.
Well, if you recognise anyone, you know what to do. 0500 600 600, or you can text us on 63399, type crime space, and then your message.
Now, take a little look at this collection of fake ID documents. It's not obvious at first sight, but every one of them features the same individual, albeit in a variety of guises. He seems to have quite a few names too. But none of them, according to police, are likely to be real. Well, the Met's Detective Inspector Gary Miles is here now to explain how you can help. We're all concerned, preoccupied sometimes, about this thing called identity theft. What is it that you and your team do to try to combat it?
Well, Amber Hill is the only unit in the world that is dedicated in getting to the bottom of these so-called identity factories and the people that use the documents they make. After the initial raids, we take all the documents, take the information from it and put it onto our database, which now contains in excess of 40,000 items. We then share that information with other police forces and financial institutions like the banks. And together we're not only preventing those documents from being used, but also trying to trace the individuals that are using them now.
Now, you see, the worrying thing is that even if somebody's face appears on fake, counterfeit documents, it doesn't mean that that person themselves, that their face has got anything to do with crime, does it?
No, not at all. We need to find out who they are and why their faces are on these documents. But they could be completely innocent. They may have had their identities hijacked. Or they could be involved in illegal activities.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Now, you use this great phrase, identity factories. There are some of these factories that are very slick operations, doing pretty difficult to detect work. Some of them not so professional.
Yeah, we see various forms of documents from different countries, driving licenses, passports. Some of them are of very high quality, but others are not quite so good. Now, as an example, and hopefully not giving too much away, this is a genuine UK passports,
okay.
And these are counterfeit books.
Okay.
They should all be the same size. If I put them together, you can immediately see that there's something wrong.
Yeah, you can. Now, you've got 5 faces here tonight that are crucial to you and your team. You're trying to get to the bottom of who these 5 people are. Tell us more.
Well, these 5 are all on our database and have all been linked to multiple documents. Now, as I said before, they could be innocent. We don't know who they are or what they're doing with these documents. So we'd urge the public, if they see them, not to approach them, but to contact us.
OK, and people can have a closer look at that on our website. If you've got any idea who the people featured in these documents might be, we would love to hear from you. It's the usual number, 0500 600 600. And as I say, if you want to take a closer look, because that was a bit quick, at the images on our website, it's bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch. Now, more news on cases that you've already helped with.
Well, in March last year, we featured the case of Mike Silcock. The 30-year-old off-duty police officer died after being the victim of a hit-and-run during a night out in Stockport in March 2009. The car involved was later burnt out in an attempt to defraud the insurers. Well, as a direct result of calls to the programme, the person responsible was identified, and yesterday the driver of the car, 26-year-old Stephen Benson from Withington in Manchester, was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months after admitting causing Mike's death as a result of careless driving. He also admitted conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and will be disqualified from driving for 5 years on his release from prison. Now, 2 other men, 30-year-old Thomas Joyce and 31-year-old Darren Hamilton, both from Burnage in Manchester, pleaded guilty to conspiring to defraud the insurance company. Joyce was sentenced to 13 weeks in prison and will be disqualified from driving for 2 years on his release. Hamilton, who was the owner of the car which killed Mike, was sentenced to 21 weeks in prison, and he'll also be disqualified from driving for 2 years when he's released. Now, Mike's family said they would like to thank the witnesses who had the courage and decency to come forward after that Crimewatch appeal.
Now, we featured this man, Byron Toner, on the Wanted Faces board in November 2009. Police were looking for him after he did a runner from court where he'd been found guilty of raping and assaulting a 19-year-old woman. Now, these are CCTV images of him fleeing from Liverpool Crown Court in October 2009. Well, last month, 27-year-old Toner was arrested, and 2 weeks ago he was sentenced to 6 years in prison.
Now, as you've just seen, your calls and texts can help crack some of the most difficult cases, and they were just as crucial when, back in March of last year, they finally revealed to detectives the whereabouts of Glenn Tranter, a suspected paedophile who'd been on the run from the police for months. The officers in the studio that night had been hopeful that someone watching might know where he was, but they could never have anticipated just what would happen next.
After after an exhaustive 8-month manhunt for a suspect who seemed to have disappeared completely. This is the story of how Crimewatch viewers helped detectives from Lancashire finally snare a dangerous sexual predator wanted for numerous offences against children. This is how you caught Glenn Tranter.
Well, it's a pretty routine investigation for us, really. Back in June 2009, we received some quite serious allegations against Glenn Tranter of a sexual nature, those offences committed against children.
Mr. Tranter?
It was time that Glenn Tranter was brought into custody for interview.
It was actually my first case as a detective. During the interview, he denied all the allegations that we put to him and didn't seem fazed by any of the questions that we asked him.
I've done nothing wrong whatsoever. I don't know why anyone would make these allegations against me.
During the interview, he was very calm, very relaxed, but at the same time was very defensive.
Mr. Tranter, before we terminate this interview, is there anything else that you would wish to add? No. Can I go now?
The evidence at that precise moment in time was insufficient to charge him with any criminal offences, so we were forced to bail him whilst we built a case against him.
Knowing it was only a matter of time before detectives had enough evidence to charge him, Tranter wasn't about to hang around. Seizing his chance, he went on the run.
We had a tip-off that he had fled the area. We were really concerned about this because here is a man who poses a huge risk to the general public and to children, the most vulnerable people in our society. Given the seriousness of the allegations against him, we put into motion immediately efforts to try and locate him. We circulate him as wanted. He goes onto the police national computer. Wherever he is stopped and checked throughout the United Kingdom, it becomes known that he's wanted by the Lancashire police.
We continued those investigations looking into his mobile phone usage, his bank accounts, worked with his insurance company regarding his car. But we just drew a blank on all of those inquiries.
Originally from West Yorkshire, Tranter had connections with Slough and the Thames Valley area, and it was there that police concentrated their efforts.
We contacted the local police in Thames Valley, who were able to tell us that during the summer of 2009, his car had activated a camera entering their area, but had never shown it to leave again.
We knew that historically he had connections in Slough. We suspected that he was working in the Slough area, perhaps under an alias.
But after months of extensive inquiries, detectives finally exhausted all their leads. Unable to trace Tranter and fearing he could offend again, they turned to Crimewatch.
Tranter was a strange individual who, if you ever met him, he would leave a lasting impression on you. His personality would be one that you wouldn't soon forget. And we felt that by putting him onto Crimewatch, anyone that had met him would recognise him again and would hopefully get in contact with us.
Hello and welcome to Crimewatch. We are live and surrounded by
DC Irving was in the studio in London. We were in contact with our colleagues in the Thames Valley Police District, especially Slough, and in the communications room in Burnley, we had a team of officers manning the telephones.
Let's join Rav with the first of this month's Most Wanted.
I was very nervous, and I was hoping more than anything else that someone would pick up the phone and tell us where he was.
Number 2 here is a nasty piece of work. He's Glenn Tranter, and he's wanted for 8 charges of sexual offences against children. He has links to Lancashire and the Thames Valley area.
Within minutes of his picture being shown on the programme, the phones were lighting up. There was plenty of calls coming in, directing us and telling us that people had seen him and they knew where he was.
Great response on the faces already, in particular number 2. This is Glenn Tranter. Check this, over 40 calls so far.
As we thought, Tranter had left a big impression on a lot of people. A lot of people recognised him from seeing him months before. It was absolutely fantastic response.
Michelle Mackenzie was one of the many Crimewatch viewers watching at home who instantly recognised Tranter's face.
I work in a bar not far from where I live, and this man came in one afternoon, giving cards out to the customers and to the staff, doing taxi rides to the airport.
Would you mind handing out a few of these for me?
Oh, not at all.
Airport taxis.
Oh, lovely.
Glenn, that's me.
Nice to meet you.
Cheers, nice to meet you.
When I saw him on Crimewatch, I was absolutely shocked.
But Michelle hadn't met Tranter in a bar in Slough or the Thames Valley area, as detectives had thought. He was, in fact, in Spain.
The phone calls we'd been getting had been placing Glenn Tranter in Medina in Spain. The phone calls were coming from expats who live in Spain, as well as holidaymakers that had been there and remembered him from the previous summer.
We were delighted. The team in the incident room and Darren down in the London studio were delighted that we'd had the response that we'd had.
Problem came in that he was abroad and he was in Spain, and we had no European arrest warrant in place, which we would have needed in order to get him into custody.
We had a good idea where Tranter was, but we still had to get him.
But later that same night, events would take an unexpected turn.
I've got a little girl myself, and my friends have all got children. And this man is walking around, and he could re-offend either here or go somewhere else. So I knew that something had to be done, and he had to be caught.
So immediately after seeing Tranter on Crimewatch, Michelle took matters into her own hands.
I remembered that he brought the taxi cards into the bar. So I phoned and asked for him.
Is that Glenn? Can I have an airport pickup from Sizzle's bar, please? It's for Michelle.
I worked at Broadmoor, the hospital, so I knew that I would be able to handle, well, I hoped I would be able to handle the situation.
Taxi for Michelle.
Won't be a minute.
Having a good time, mate?
Yeah, it's a great place.
Are you ready? Good. Off we go.
Hey! What the hell are you doing? Get off me!
I know who you are.
What do you mean?
I know exactly what you've done, and you know exactly why I'm doing this. Somebody call the police.
Hello?
Sorry to wait you, sir, but Glenn Tranter's been arrested.
What?
Glenn Tranter's been arrested, sir.
Right, we need to get moving on this right now.
Well, it came as a complete surprise. It was a race against time, without a doubt. I knew that the Spanish authorities probably wouldn't be able to hold him for very long. I had to apply for a European arrest warrant. It normally does take up to 2 weeks, and it seemed like an impossible task to achieve that in time.
At the time, I was still in London. I needed to get back. The pressure was now on. We now had to do everything we possibly could, and as quickly as we possibly could, to get this warrant in place.
Glenn Tranter, date of birth 15/6/69, born in Keighley.
We had evidence to show that Glenn had committed sexual offences against children, and we knew if he was on the run, there's the chance they could do that to somebody else.
Remarkably, less than 24 hours after Crimewatch had aired, detectives managed to secure a European arrest warrant to detain Glenn Tranter. But it was too late. The police in Spain had already let him go.
I was absolutely gutted. My main concern was that we were back to square one and we would have to find him all over again because he had that opportunity to flee.
But by now, everyone in the area knew who he was and what he was accused of. This time, he knew the game was up. With nowhere left to run, he handed himself in. After spending months on the run, Glenn Tranter was finally flown back to the UK and straight into police custody. Pleading guilty to the charges against him, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison.
Glenn Tranter did think he was above the law. He had treated us with contempt. He had fled Lancashire, fled the country, and thought he was an untouchable.
I was just so glad that I was watching Crimewatch and I could actually do something about it. I think sometimes I didn't really think what I was actually doing. It just happened, and it happened the way it did.
Crimewatch played a massive role in locating Tranter. Without the phone calls that were coming in, I don't think I'd be sat here today knowing that he'd been convicted and was in prison.
Michelle, we salute you. Don't you love Crimewatch viewers? I mean, you literally could not make this up.
It was incredible. We often say one call can make all the difference. Here, the people that made the call then set a trap for Glenn Tranter and then actually caught him. It was astonishing. It has to be said the Spanish police who arrived at the bar originally didn't quite know what to make of it. They had people rushing up to them saying, we've caught this guy who's just been on Crimewatch, and they didn't really understand, but someone in the bar remembered he was recording the programme at home, so he rushed off, got the DVD, gave it to police, they watched it, they realised, and the programme ended around 10 o'clock. By 2 a.m, Glenn Tranter is sitting there in a police cell. I think it's one of our fastest ever.
Well, you say fastest, actually, maybe almost a bit too fast as it happens.
Yeah, and almost the wrong way round. They had their man before they had the arrest warrant, because remember, Tranter hadn't committed any crime in Spain, so the police couldn't hold him without having that arrest warrant. Now, normally that takes about 2 weeks. Here, Lancashire police worked with the CPS, with Interpol, with SOCA, with the Spanish police, all flat out to get a judge to sign this arrest warrant within 24 hours. I mean, it was quite some achievement. They managed it, but as you saw in the film, it was still too late. They'd released him. But those expats in Spain weren't about to let this guy slip through the net. The guy who shared a flat with Tranter confronted him, said, look, we all now know about these paedophile charges, you're not going to be able to run away, and insisted on driving him back to the police station. And actually, during that drive, Tranter admitted for the first time he had attacked one of the girls.
And when he made it into court in Britain, he did admit to all the main charges.
Yeah, 8 counts against 3 girls aged 11, 13 and 15. It turned out he had 2 previous convictions, similar sorts of offences. I mean, a horrible, horrible character, sentenced to 6 years. He'll also go on the sex offenders register for life when he's released. So I think in anyone's language, English or Spanish, a real result.
Good news. Now, Rav, you've also got details of what else has been happening on the phones tonight.
Yeah, some good calls already on Ricardo Cunha, the murder in South London, the 23-year-old. 8 calls already and a name suggested for who may have been concerned there. Then, very quickly, the Leah Brook arson, such a tragic case, the 81-year-old up in Wakefield. We've had 20 calls, hopefully some information among them that leads to arrests being made. And then, very quickly, the Hove armed robbery. We asked for information about the knife. Please, no more calls about the knife. However, one of you did call in with a possible name for who was involved, but you didn't leave your own name. Officers really need to speak to you. If that was you, please call back.
Yeah, right, that's everything for now. Details on all of tonight's cases, including our reconstructions, are on the website, of course. It's bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. I think the phone's been really busy. Seems like it's been a busy night here. Remember, though, the lines do stay open until midnight tomorrow night, so there is still plenty of time to call. Crimewatch is going to be back next month, but before then, we're back in just 35 minutes after the news with an update on all of our cases. If you think that you can help, do call now. Your calls really do count. I will see you at 10:35. Until then, from all of us, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
And indeed, Crimewatch Update can be seen here in Northern Ireland at 11:15 tonight. Up next, it's the national and local news.